Yet everyone. It's great to see you all here today on the President's page. She'e Ethel Branchin Chef Bimpatwani Nishle Nakai Bushes Chin Sinijani Dashache Auto Nakai Dashanala. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. I'm the nation's Attorney General and honored to be able to serve in this role a second time with the blessing of the President, and also very excited to be here with you today on this particular platform. The Department of Justice has been working very hard to increase transparency according to the President's charge and challenge to all of the division directors. He's also challenged us to try to make the Navajo Nation government serve our people in a more meaningful way. And so this is one way that we've found to be able to serve the people in terms of transferring knowledge and information that the attorneys at the Department of Justice have to the Navajo people. Our last presentation was on my Attorney General page, and we covered how to get a home site lease. That was very well attended, and we felt like there's a lot of interest in these topics. So the President invited us to share this information on his page so we would be able to reach more of our Navajo people. And so we're very honored and excited to be here today. Today's topic is Navajo Nation chapters, essentially Navajo Nation local government law. It's going to go beyond just sort of the general chapter information. So I'm excited for today's presentation. I hope all of you are as well. The government structure, how our government functions, is important to ensuring that our people are actually being served by the government. And one of those important points of service is at the chapter level. So I'm joined here today by Rodgerick Begay, Assistant Attorney General for the chapter unit, as well as a number of members of the chapter unit staff. So I'm going to hand things over to Assistant Attorney General Rodgerick Begay to get us started. Thank you, Rod.
Thank you, Madam Attorney General, and thank you to the President Nygren and Vice President Montoya and the administration for giving us this opportunity to talk to those who want to learn more about chapters. Kia ani eta che do sitna jini eta shanale do tselana eda adena sha. That's where I commute from every day. And one of my first jobs was actually an attorney many years ago for DOJ. It was my first job to help chapters. And what I discovered was that chapter law is very unique. You can be a city attorney or a former county attorney, and you come here and it's going to be different. Everything's going to be different. So you can't just use knowledge from the outside and try to apply it here because of the laws of the chapters are so unique. And historically, DOJ only had one attorney assigned to provide legal advice to all the chapters. And so in 2013, I came back to DOJ with this vision of creating a chapter unit. And in the former administration, the former AG and the former division director, they helped create this. And, we continue to get support from the 25th Navajo Nation Council and also the President Nygren and Vice President Montoya administration. We get support from them continually, and obviously Madam AG and Deputy AG Claw continue to provide that support, and we have job openings available. If you want to learn the uniqueness of chapters, we have vacancies, and the law that you learn here will carry you for many years. So I encourage, if you're out there wanting to learn about chapters and you want to practice law, this is a good place to practice. So I want to hand it over to my staff to introduce themselves first, and then we'll go into our presentation. Chris?
Yate. My picture was down on the bottom, so I thought I was going to introduce myself there. Shea ya Chris Paul Benali in Shado be between the Shado she was chinsin on Jenny that she channel national bada chanel. Ado and na puna nested day a national the Navajo Department of Justice chapter unit principal tribal court advocate is I used to be a chapter coordinator out of Cameron. Also I over here working for Tusi still under the Navajo Department of Justice in Winter Rock, and that'll be my intro. So yeah.
Yate she Cynthia Freeman in the share, Kia audience, because of Lena Bush's chin, has Anna Zoha Dutch, 20 A Dashamella, Nana Hasana Danasha. Good morning, everyone. My name is Cynthia Freeman. I've been with the chapter unit for a little over 3 years now, and assist Mr. Begay with providing services to the 110 chapters. Thank you.
Lorenzo?
Hear me, Rodgerick? Yes, my name is Lorenzo Curley, and I'm attorney here at Chapter Unit. I've been here just going on my first year. Before then, I practiced law at the Navajo courts. Honagani shido bit ani bashishin. Ado ki ani dashiro tachiri dashinale. Chitas I Holier de Edasha Sanders, Arizona. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And we have a PowerPoint here for you today. And normally this is like a 4-hour presentation, but we have reduced it and to provide you the best pieces of information. So I hope you enjoy it. And we'll begin with our first presenter, Mr. Benali.
Good morning. I just introduced myself. So my first section is going to be the Neketchigoshi on the Navajo side, because everything's pretty much written in English. So ben masando and she tojo da is kagi dishe nahat baganshe ya ile there's nothing about on there's not a kinsen le sanda atleko ishe bahan leho behas ani hata yaki in le besh bahas ane hadetila do ya in she de ida ho she okoto ata bakado di ai besh bahas ane da ila chot ai ben nache Masandon hit Shadon at the neck at Yadash keep up the Nicotine Sadakisi. There's I became or Tin Shade, his Shahad or his even yet, don't need even Yaho. Ado, Leonard Ade has Tridosani, who we just start with the English side. Sometimes people are still confused. Even now we try to connect from the Navajo side to the English side. On the Reynard Ade hat, this Adis and the Ligishi or Cisna Jeneth, the Eastern Mountain in the Alamosa, Colorado, Addis Hosis Najina. So Zitli, Grant Speaker, Mount Taylor, South Chugos, Shata Ahado, Archway Doko, Stede, Cassandra, Flagstaff, Ado, the Bensa, Lay Hesperus, the Ranga Bigache, just at the northern region. What I can't show what I get this and the don't get this speaking, don't get this. What I so there's nothing that so our old people still practice that, and we still believe that, so even Nacharo. Ahnle not anishi the halone and the rede as trito sanishi she tell she the hat hatten that scott ibes bahos in hastri the han dodge the azichi unlit the net of bagan go she not ani halone do hashil so a chief joy or your aunt had that the king though they had that a hot na they should the linear structure the shin on hitchway she host a shin how the na assist out of a lot. Och she then it no centralized government now Spanish to American now American so Latino because no way not shit that was our government not shit is no she not il one she be sena il tato is not kids at the house not at Hineka. Doyada deal chi ho, she have this quite out on the hot it's not shahadi at no she. She ado a bucket the whole don't she shopping how she is in that they voice their concerns like that, so they used to raise their hands, they get addressed like that. She hot out a sena il tahne at lena ate ne but and has the other bucket the whole don't. Next slide. I get the shot that so my time is limited, even though I'm trying to go through this really quick. A lot of it takes a long, a big long presentation, but even that it's going to be a little faster than normal. So the Treaty of 1849, there's several treaties, but the United States under the United States government, so it's Treaty of 1849. The clans, the United States make treaties with clans. But treaty doesn't, then the people come along and they violate that. It should be a treaty. To be careful either. So he can't go into president. That Ado the long walk happened. She ado got net that nil people. Our people got taken to Huelte. Jo has net chain Rossness. Huelte I send a Huelte ho and let out I shan't get that leho children that you quote she da just stego children da quote she da deho I seen and Huelte it asked or she or the other she even that she do ya da has net the has three ho you on the issues of other ho. A treaty of 1868 she are the issue busy kada yilla e nal so Sunday no ne kan del so sa ho e she are the bash got that she has three she but see in the unlo ho kototi zelt adi sanelike she le na san me kaya chon hit no kasna e adi ha ol de ben na e she dit zelt adi sanelike e so start and hand dot after the 1868 reservation done the Navajo reservation. We think that the whole reservation was given to us back at the same time. And Hanat and Holland, Hotan Shahakoshi 15 slats now sleep that ho. Is she Adet Hunt il Dashi Hojonja Eliashi had called she Eliad ho. The agreement was laid Sechito Chicago that this guy was so slapping a castle and they go had costly dolation hold on issue auto shut the auto na home course the four direction go K had on the 18 treaty of 1868 reservation but caught on in that was from 1868 although 1900 she net cut the insulin issue hot the had let ho you see she ben ya hat inike chuti belkan kachoy ben ya hat inike a slak gola chikishti beta inish she based on that zogi la landa atleki adon nal sos badik ol khaki ho beta ba hu hinsen ki ado khain dal shi ki based on benal sos nan not zogi ba hayaniki adon da an tlana atlek ko aben benal ya chede da ishi da the shi ya halyaniki adon le bandal aki hawanda adesi lo thinda yendal eshi hot slak ko hat so ado nana ko lachiko edik kaya na zo kila di kwa zel as ado to kwa ota ol khato di kwa na sos pahawan hot ada no di kwa khota si yen cho hot ada she hot anda zo e si cho ben ya hat e kut a yen khil ta hot ni la she kuto hot a the neck achin khich a has si to shit na do shike eshene a hol so ya. Next slide, next presenter.
Enter. Oh. And so we transitioned from a traditional form of government, and we're just going to go a very brief history. This history is long, actually, but just the pieces of information that actually influence the chapter system is what we're going to cover. And obviously, it's common knowledge. In 1923, the BIA needed someone to sign the oil leases, and so tribal council was formed. And how do you deal with the local communities and their relationships with the Bulganas and those that are outside of our nation? John Hunter was a superintendent at that time, and he's credited with developing the first chapter over at Loop. But we didn't actually recognize chapters as a Navajo tribal nation until 1955. There was a budget appropriation giving stipends to chapter officials. $12 per meeting was their stipend, and a lot of chapters, 86 chapters, use this resolution to say this is when we were created. Whereas 3 years later, in 1958, the council, they created certification procedures saying basically this is how you can become a chapter, an official chapter of the Navajo tribe. You have to show that your community has been together for many years. You got to have at least 1,000 people, and also you got to have access to a chapter meeting. So that's the law, basic law that was created back in 1958. So, which means that 86 chapters didn't have to go through that process. So today, according to the 2010 census, there's roughly about 40 chapters that don't have 1,000 people. So obviously, sometimes leaders nowadays talk about that 1,000 person threshold. And then, laws were slowly developing in 1959. It was actually an election law to define how you can become a chapter official. And inside that law, there was these very basic duties of chapter officials. Obviously, chapter president presides over the meeting, and then the vice president steps in the president's place in their absence, and then the secretary treasurer, or as the secretary at that time, acts as a treasurer. So, these laws were very basic. There's plenty more things that happen between then and 1979, but you'll see that chapter officials ran the show in the beginning until the 80s. Here with 1979, as laws got developed, chapter laws were placed in Title II of the Navajo Nation Code. And here, one of them, when the law was amended, one of them was giving the chapter president the duty to supervise chapter personnel. And so slowly outlining also the fact that it's the chapter officials who have the duty to define those chapter policies, and with guidance from the chapter community. So obviously passing policies during chapter meetings through a valid chapter resolution. And then also at that time, officials were purchasing equipment. And so, they had those types of duties. This is when we first also learned of the 25-member quorum for chapter meetings. And so this is where it originates. And then a year later, there was a plan of operation, a template for chapters and chapter officials. And later we'll see where these things end up eventually. But if you make a comparison to today's law, you'll see that it's basically a copy paste from 1980, this advisory committee resolution. And what I've tried to do in all of the slides is give you either the council resolution that was passed, the citation to it, or the advisory committee resolution, or the transportation and community development resolution, or the resources and development resolution. So that, if you ever are wanting copies of these public information, then just let me know and I can provide copies. But moving on to the beginnings of sharing of powers with the 1984 Chapter Manager Program, they were responsible. Now they are the ones who are purchasing equipment. They are implementing management systems for personnel and things of that sort. So they're now administering fiscal matters, bookkeeping, and at that time they were reporting to both chapter officials and council delegates. And then 7 years later, there was a change. The chapter manager program once existed under the executive side of the Navajo Nation, was transferred over to legislative under the community service coordinator program. And this is probably one of the reasons why the chapter manager and CS community service coordinator position names are sometimes used interchangeably. But later we'll learn why chapter managers are referred to if you're LGA certified, and if you have a community service coordinator, that generally refers to that you have a CSC at a non-LGA certified chapter. But in 1991, one of the significant things that happened regarding supervision was the council delegate was the person who administered or supervised the community service coordinator. So that continued to happen all the way through when the LGA was passed in 1998. However, another thing that was an important influence on the current Local Governance Act was the Navajo government reform, the riot, the change from a chairmanship to a 3-branch government here in Window Rock. That had significant impacts because that's when we first started using language like, we need separation of powers and checks and balances. There was an amendment to Title II, Section 102B, that said, all powers not delegated are reserved to the Navajo Nation Council, which means basically that, the council has the power to delegate, to other branches, other departments. And so they create the policy in order to do that. And that continues. And we'll see that here in a bit. And that was 1989. When we jumped to 1995, we had the Office of Navajo Government Development issuing a memorandum. And what they were proposing was a home rule charter process for chapters. And it gave the option for chapters. You can either stay as a 3-chapter official system, or you can adopt a commission manager. And they brought this idea of home rule. And home rule basically, if you compare that to state home rules, municipalities, it's actually giving the local people the power. Well, actually not even giving, I mean, they have the power. It's the idea that it's not our state governments that have the power. It's the local people that have the power. And the state only has as much power as we say you have. That's home rule. And so they wanted to bring that type of system to Navajo at that time. And it was a proposal. And obviously, the first draft of the Local Governance Act was rejected by council because, the council, they don't want to give up their powers under home rule. And so there was basically a 2-year drafting process for the law we have today. In 1998 is when we finally have the passage of the Local Governance Act. And what that did, it did many things, but some of the things that, just for your information, is all of the chapter laws. It went from Title II over to Title 26. So when you open a code book today, you got to look at Title 26. And then one of the things that I always find interesting is Exhibit G. We call that, as lawyers, the legislative history of a law. And that gives a lot of insight about what our leaders at that time were thinking about in terms of what chapters are. And basically, they go from, thinking about home rule to a complete reversal, and they remind, the chapters that, hey, we are the governing body. We delegate to you, chapters, what your powers are. And so if you ever get a chance to read Exhibit G, I encourage you, to read that, because it gives a lot of insights. What were the leaders thinking 25 years ago? What were they thinking about chapters? What were the plans for chapters? And so that gives a lot of insight. Some laws, at the same time that the LGA was passed, it didn't amend the other 25 titles of the Navajo Nation Code. Some amendments were made to Title 12 for procurement purposes, but it didn't go through every single law and amend it. But here's one important amendment. Section 1 of Title 2. This is the law that says the Navajo Nation government, what we consist of. We have obviously the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch of the Navajo Nation. That is our government. Well, in 1998, they added the red language. They said, okay, in addition to those three branches, our Navajo Nation government includes political subdivisions, of which are not under any branch of the central government. And so as lawyers, you wonder, okay, what was the theory behind that, in light of the fact that, council is the governing body of the Navajo Nation. And, the acts subsequent to the act, you always look back at that language in red and think about, what were the intentions of saying they're not under any branch? They're not under Division of Community Development. They are not under council. Where are they? Are they a fourth branch? Because political subdivision, when you hear that term and you go to Title 26, chapters are defined as political subdivisions of the Navajo Nation. So, when reading that together, chapters are not under any branch of the central government. And so that's, in light of the history, it's very interesting how that happens. And then very briefly, I'll go over the LGA. And I think that whether it's with AG's platform or the president's platform, I think we're thinking about doing more in-depth sessions about some of the things that we're talking about today, because I think some of our slides, it deserves 1 hour itself. And so, okay, so having said that, here's a bird's eye view. When you open the code book, you look at Section 1, some of the things that that you may not know. It says the executive side of the chapter is the chapter employees. They are the chapter administration. And the legislative side of the chapter, it consists of the chapter membership, and the chapter officials. So the membership plus the officials, they define the chapter policies. And it's the executive, the chapter executive, that executes those policies. So that's what I mean in terms of how the government reform at the Window Rock level impacted the structure at the local level. And then it also talks about, these the Local Governance Act, how the chapter officials and the chapter administration, they operate under consistently with separation of powers and checks and balances. And so moving on to Section 3, this is that certification process I was talking about earlier. It comes from 1958. So this is just a regurgitation, so to speak, of 1958. Section 101, 10 to 103. This is this governance certification process. And I'll talk here in a little bit about the difference between governance certification under 101 versus Section 3. But these sections basically say that they're basically encouraging chapters. Please get your 5 management system certified by, formerly TCDC or now the Resource and Development Committee. Please get it certified. Once you become certified, you get all of these authorities listed under Section 103. So this is the sections that of the law that talks about that. And then when you look at Section 1001, what are the duties and responsibilities of the chapter president, vice president, and secretary treasurer? Well, here it is. It's a copy paste basically coming from that 1980 advisory committee resolution. And we can say the same thing for Section 1002, 1003. 1003 obviously is the one that says you got to have 25 member quorum. This is how you make a motion at your chapter meetings, how it gets seconded, how you vote, that's the order of business. And one interesting fact that not everybody knows is that everybody seems to assume that chapters follow the Roberts Rules of Order. But within Section 103, it tells chapters to develop their own rules of order. So I often encourage chapters, develop your own rules of order, because the Roberts Rules of Order, those are for corporate entities. It doesn't necessarily accommodate governments. And that's the reason why you have, Navajo Nation Council has their own rules of order. The committees have their own rules of order. So chapters, you really should have your own rules of order. You should work with your people and maybe adopting some of the rules from Robert's Rules, but making it your own. And so that's a law that a lot of people don't know about. And then under Section 1004 talks about the duties, very basic duties of the chapter administration. But if you read into it, it borrows from the concepts of what the chapter manager was required to do in 1984 and what the community service coordinator had to do in 1991. So it borrows from those programs, historic programs. The ordinance procedure, another fun fact about that is that you can tie that to the Home Rule Charter process in 1995. How you become a home rule at that time that was proposed is almost exactly how chapters can create their own local laws. So again, you can make that connection. Now we have in that ordinance procedure, there's 2 different types of ordinance procedures. And then under Section 2002, there's chapter contract requirements. For example, a lot of people don't know that, contracts, before your chapter president signs it, it's supposed to be approved by the community first during a chapter meeting. That doesn't always happen. And the chapter contract, it needs to say, it has to have a provision saying it can't waive sovereign immunity of the chapter. It can't, it has to have sufficient funds. So those are all similar requirements that our own Window Rock level contracts require. So you can make the connection there. Zoning, we're going to talk about that here in a bit. And then eminent domain hasn't been practiced at the chapter level, but that requires an ordinance in order to do that. So if you read section 101 and 102, the basic idea at that time was chapters, you need to develop your own fire management system. And once that happens, then it gets reviewed by the Auditor General. Once the Auditor General okays it, then it goes to the Resource and Development Committee. And once they approve it, and then you get those powers at section 103. And again, I think we could have another hour session talking about what those section 103 powers are. And then when I came in to DOJ, I remember that there was only 5 LGA certified chapters out of 110. And so Navajo leadership at the time was saying, we need to streamline the process. So that's what we tried to do in developing a template fire management system. The idea being that if you adopt this template, you're basically, Auditor General is going to say yes, and then RDC is going to say yes. And all of a sudden, you should be governance certified, and you'll get all of those section 103 powers. The idea, again, was to get more chapters governance certified. Yet today, in 2023, there's only 45 governance certified chapters. So a majority, 65 of them are still non-governance certified. So they don't have section 103 powers. Again, I already contrasted section 3, so I won't get into that. And I'll send it over to my next presenter, which is Ms. Freeman.
So I'll be talking about procurement, which is, as Rod mentioned, one of the components of the fire management system. And here we have a chart that breaks down the differences between the non-governance certified chapters and the governance certified. So under the non-governance certified chapters, they follow fiscal policies generally under the 2010 template, and versus a governance certified chapter, they have their own fiscal policies developed, and they are required to be certified by the Resources and Development Committee, or RDC. They also have an option to go under an original fire management system or follow the 2007 template FMS for fiscal, or the 2010 template. So this makes it, since I've been with the chapter unit, just ensuring that we know which chapter follows which template, and ensuring that that's where they receive their fiscal policies, the procurement policies, because procurements are a major component to passing contracts and approving those through the chapters. For the non-governance certified chapters, they follow the Navajo Nation procurement regulations, and they also have contract templates for non-governance certified chapters that are consistent with the sections 2002 of the LGA, and then their chapter resolution is required because the community must pre-approve that finalized contract. Also, the contract must go through the Navajo Nation's executive review process, and the signature for that contract is going to be signed by the Navajo Nation president. Moving on to the governance certified chapters, their procurement policies are certified. They have to be reviewed, as mentioned, by RDC, the Resources Development Committee. Their contract template is also consistent with Section 2002 of the LGA. And also they do require a chapter resolution that's also consistent on both sides. And then the difference here for the governance certified chapters is the contract is to be signed by the chapter president. So it doesn't have to go all the way up through executive review. The chapter president can sign. Next slide, please. And then shifting over to personnel, one of the other components of the fine management system. For non-governance certified chapter, they follow the Navajo Nation Personnel Policies Manual. And for employment statuses, the Community Service Coordinator, also called the CSC, and the Accounts Maintenance Specialist, the AMS, are executive branch employees within the ASC of the Administrative Service Centers of the Division of Community Development. A lot of acronyms there, but so those are they're considered executive branch employees. The Public Employment Program and Summer Youth, those that are employed under those programs, they're considered chapter employees. So just making sure that there's that distinction there. When it comes to discipline of the Community Service Coordinator, that is coordinated with the Administrative Service Center. And also, we do highly recommend that any type of disciplinary actions also be coordinated with the Department of Justice. And also, for other chapter employees, for disciplinary actions, that's handled by the Community Service Coordinator in coordination with the Administrative Service Center. Again, we do encourage the chapters to have DOJ part of this coordination. And for the non-governance certified chapters, they do follow sections 1001E and 1004D that are applicable here. For governance certified chapters for personnel matters, they also develop their own fiscal policies. They must be certified by the Resource Development Committee and the original 5 management systems. So going back, also they can follow the 2007 template or the 2010 template. The employment status, the chapter manager, the administrative assistant, the public employment program, and summer youth are all considered chapter employees. In terms of discipline, for chapter managers, that's handled by the direct local supervisor, the chapter official, whoever is designated as the direct local supervisor. Discipline of other chapter employees is handled by the chapter manager. And sections 1001E and 1004D also apply. I know someone in the chat said reiterate sections 1001E, elected officials. I'm not sure what that means. Let's see. So essentially, these sections are the laws for personnel are why chapters cannot pass resolutions to remove an employee. It helps to balance the separations of powers. And so under the Local Governance Act, that's what's placed there. Rod, do you want to add any other clarifications here regarding that?
Oh, there I am. Okay, so section 1001E basically says chapter officials, you are prohibited in the direct management and operation of the chapter administration. Again, earlier I talked about, at the time the LGA was passed, the CSC, the Community Service Coordinator, they were supervised by the council delegates. An interesting fact behind that is that the former Transportation Community Development Committee considered the question, when the LGA gets passed, should we give supervision back to the chapter officials? And the answer was no. We want as council delegates to maintain supervision over the chapter staff. So that's why we have section 1001 E. And in addition to that, also 1004D talks about the membership, the chapter membership, same provision. The chapter membership are prohibited in the management and operation of the chapter administration. So collectively, that's how you get to the incorporating the separation of powers, checks and balances. The council delegates at the time were the supervisors. So, adding all of that back together, that's how it was supposed to be applied. But then, other things happened after the LGA was passed, and that's why you have chapter officials serving again as supervisors. But that's just the background behind that. Back to Cynthia.
Yeah, so the personnel essentially for both the non-governance and certified chapters are governed under the sections that Rod just mentioned. But just keeping in mind that for the employment statuses, there are some differences in terms of who is in charge of the disciplinary actions and also when DOJ should get involved. But that concludes my section. Thank you.
Okay, this Mr. Curley.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, let me provide that background. I became familiar with Title 26 back in 2003 in my role as a public official, elected public official. And I worked this body of law for 12 years, and then a couple more years as a chapter president. What I do recall was that at the time I became familiar with this, I didn't have knowledge of, the body of law that Rodgerick explained to us, the history of chapters. What I knew about chapters was the fund management system that became law in 1998. As I understood it at the time, I started working with the chapters, is that, we had to be certified. We've got to get certified if we're going to exercise any kind of authority over money. Because when you're working with the Navajo people at the local level, they're really interested in exercising authority over money, so that to meet their basic needs. And so that was the problem that I encountered. And so working with Title 26, we start learning that we can exercise some of these powers that are promised to us, but Title 26, if we get certified. We receive monies from the Navajo Nation for workers, PEP workers. We receive monies from the Navajo Nation Council for housing discretionary funds. We just receive monies from the Navajo Nation Council for sales tax and other funds collected by the Navajo Nation government were given to us as grants to the chapter. And so we were forced to exercise personnel management, record management, procurement, and property purchases, even without being certified. And so when you think back on it, a lot of this exercise of authority were based on historical facts. These were being the chapters were exercising these authorities way back. So what Title 26 did was it went an extra step forward, in my opinion, is that it's promised the chapters that if you get certified and if you exercise land use authorities, you get your land use plan certified and authorized by RDC, you can become a home rule institution. You can become a home rule government. See, that's what the Navajo people understand chapter government. That's how they understand it. They said, "Nihin hoholni sa nihe yahe kudo inda itnis e adinat ani e yahe wik edadil no e nahanjajnis kude beso nihiche hot anat ahon that's just on could yahe adhini zinigit yahe benel nistolil jo could ayan sa case." And so when I became familiar with Title 26, this was going on. And so, but in spite of the fact that we were already exercising a lot of these authorities, we wanted chapters to become certified, so that we can have these 5 management system and we can have the authorities mentioned under Title 103. And we set out to work to do that. And the chapters that I work with were all certified during that time, using the templates that were provided for by the Navajo Nation government. And then at the same time, the chapters that I work with, I thought we'll take another step. We'll get our land use certified. Okay, so we started working on land use certification, and we got that accomplished. So we have two requirements mentioned in Title 26. One is certification, 5 management certification. The other one is your land use certification. So when you put those two together, Title 26 says you can exercise these authorities, which are listed in 103E. In there, it says you can acquire property by eminent domain. You can acquire capital improvement projects, monies to do that. You can do zoning ordinance. You can produce regulatory ordinances, alternative form of government, municipal form of government, and local taxes. You can implement local taxes and fees and bonds. Now, these are things that municipalities in the United States, they exercise these powers. And what the Navajo Nation Council promised chapters, that if you have certified 5 management system and certified local land use system, you can take another step and produce ordinances that will allow you to exercise these powers. And I think a lot of chapters want to do that. I know that the chapters that I work with, we were striving to go that way. We wanted to exercise our own powers. And I think that one chapter that I work with, that's you, they implemented a AFOG, alternative form of government. They wanted to go that direction. They wanted to collect taxes, and they want to use that taxes within their communities to generate more businesses and start zoning ordinances. That was their plan, and it's still in their books, and they're still part of their plan. So this is the beauty of Title 26, is that it gives each chapter, each community, the authority to exercise these powers in order to become self-sufficient. Economic development, community development. These are things that our leaders saw that the chapters could do. Rather than rely on Window Rock, we rely on ourselves. So that's the thrust of Title 26. That's the way I understood it, and that's the way I talked to people that I met, our constituents. That's what I talked to them about. Is that if we do this Title 26 and follow the procedures and follow the mandates of the laws, and we can achieve self-sufficiency. We can achieve and be our own government. yahe nat alya ako kat yahe bike ka ako cho ataw nishin cho hinsin abin nat alya gi shi atadilnis bikaw atadilnis cho sakis le he chapters there to that case. Rod, that covers the post LGA and certified chapters in AFOG. So return the floor back to you.
Yeah, Mr. Curley. Again, he's a former council delegate and a former chapter president. And so appreciate his input a lot of times when we're trying to provide guidance to chapters, and he shares his view from the chapter's perspective. And then on a personal note, for me, my mom, my late mom, was a chapter president as well. And so she was so ambitious. All these chapter officials are so ambitious, chapter employees. They just want to better their community. And sometimes our laws are not there to accommodate that sometimes. And in this next slide, a lot of our chapter laws, it's not all in one place. You go to the Division of Community Development website, and they have some of it, but if you click the chapter tab, it's not going to be there. You got to go to the archives tab in order to get a copy of these things that are listed here on the slide, the updated version of the LGA, the Privacy Act, which tells you basically chapter resolutions are public records. The meeting minutes is public record. The procurement regulations, like earlier Cynthia said, non-government certified chapters followed that. That's there. The AFOG that Mr. Curley talked about, how you become an AFOG as an LGA certified chapter, that's there. The PEP policies, the template, and also the plan of operation, the current plan of operation for the administrative service centers, who we also partnered with because they provide a lot of technical assistance to chapters. And so we're constantly advising the ASCs as well. And then another resource, if you go to the Office of Management and Budget's website, and every year they issue a budget instructions manual. And then if you download that, and then you go all the way to Appendix M and M-1, especially M-1, it talks about all of the different, most of the fund accounts at the chapter level. And some of them have the prohibited expenditures, prohibited or the allowable expenditures and the prohibited. So a lot of people sometimes ask me, why can't we use this money for this? Well, here are all the laws that govern those funds. And so, we have copies of all of this. And one of the major projects I hope to have one day is to list all of these things that on chapter website so that the people know where they can find all of these things. One of the questions we often get is where can I find my chapter's 5 management system? Well, if you're LGA certified, then there's going to be either a Transportation Community Development Committee resolution for it, or it's going to be a Resources and Development Committee resolution. And we have records of most of those. So again, that is public information. Your chapter should be able to allow you to view that. Whereas if you're not governance certified, then we have the templates. Those templates have not been updated since 2010. It's one of my projects that I want to, complete. And updating, because some of those are severely outdated. A lot of chapters, they pay by electronically now. for their gas, their local gas. They don't use checks as often anymore. And so, we need to update our fiscal policies that accommodate some of that. So again, if your chapters should have these 5 management systems and be able to provide you access to it. But if not, then again, you can come and ask the DOJ chapter unit. We do have some special projects. We're trying to participate in amending the LGA. And again, DOJ has been a part of many efforts to amend the LGA. For over a decade, we've been participating in various efforts like regionalization. So, this is just yet another effort to try to fix what we've been doing for the past 25 years. I just mentioned the 2010 template 5 management system, creating, something for that. 2017, RDC asked chapters to create a chapter emergency management plan. Some chapters have, but I think if there was a template that chapters could use, that would be helpful. So that's another project. And then there's a developing ARPA related templates to help with ARPA projects. And then some future projects, maybe developing rules of order that I talked about earlier. And then again, we get involved again with other projects like the Net Action Plan. We're currently helping with the burial regulations, and also Madam AG's Anti-Corruption Task Force to really pin down those who steal from the chapters, whether you're a chapter official or chapter employee. We want to, make our government, have our trust in our government, because at the local level that, you hear stories, and we want to be a part of the effort to fix that cycle. So that is our presentation. I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot, and I certainly enjoyed providing this information and hope to do more. Ahead.
Sweet morning light touches the eastern sky as I'm standing on this reservation road. Been looking forward to this day when I would walk this road. This road takes me back to my baby's house. Reservation road, take me home, carry me onward, back to her. Reservation road, take me home, carry me onward, back to her.